There is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing at all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that will lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of the comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. All right, no surprise to any of you, women are struggling at work, and they're struggling for a host of reasons: volume overload, creating visibility, responsibilities outside of work, and the list could go on. Now, here's something that may not surprise you. Men are struggling as well for a host of reasons. All those that I just mentioned, plus a lot of arising expectations about what it means to be masculine. All right, we're not going to create the kind of organizations, the kind of cultures that we all want that allow everybody to thrive and to innovate and to collaborate and ultimately to produce great results if we don't understand what's not working for men as well as what's not working for women. So the focus on today is understanding what it takes to create those true partnerships at work. So my guest for today is Jennifer McCollum. Jennifer is a known CEO, a speaker, and a leadership expert, and her mission is about building more inclusive workplaces that are going to advance women and engage men as partners in equity. She is currently president and CEO of Catalyst, which is a global nonprofit dedicated to accelerating the progress of women at work. Previously, before that, she was the first female CEO of Linkage, which is a leadership development firm focused on changing the face of leadership in general. And there she successfully led its acquisition by the SHRM organization, Society for Human Resource Management. Her insights have appeared all over everywhere. She has a prior book, but the book we're talking about today is Men at Work, The Roadmap to Gender Partnership. So Jennifer, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Wanda. It's so good to be with you again.
Again, indeed. You know, you're joining that rare club of people who are repeaters. So that says something wonderful about how much I enjoy talking to you. All right.
Well,
Go ahead.
My goal is to be like the Saturday Night Live, where you can do the 5-peat and get a special, bathrobe.
I'll put that in the hopper of things I need to do for guests who are on the multiple repeat strategy. All right. So we're both really familiar with the common themes about women at work and why the workplace doesn't work for them. It's hours. It's the need to network. It's the need to brag or boast or self-promote. It's a lack of support for responsibilities that occur outside of work. From my own work, it's the expertise trap. You get stuck in being the expert and don't get yourself out of that comfort zone. It's a lack of sponsors. We have no end in sight in the list of things that are not working for women. But we haven't really talked about what's not working for men. And I think that's because men seem to be getting the kind of opportunities that would allow them to accelerate. I want to know your view. What's your view on this?
Well, I'm actually glad you started with the challenges that women have always faced and still face in the workplace. And you mentioned it. So in my very first book, which was In Her Own Voice, A Woman's Rise to CEO, we dissected what those challenges are, how women can overcome them, and how anyone who is supporting the rise of women can help them as well. That is not the topic of this conversation, but I do want to start with what are we seeing in the last few years is that the challenges that we have been tracking, and these are systemic challenges when you're looking at labor market participation, when you're looking at representation from the C-suite down to every level of leadership and board positions, when you're looking at pay inequity, especially when you start looking at the intersection of pay inequity with things like women of color. Those things are not only not getting better, although I do want to acknowledge progress over decades. In the last very short term, they've actually gotten worse. There's a lot of reasons for that, and we can dissect those. So I always want to start there because this is never a us versus them conversation. We have looked at catalysts at what is it that prevents men from stepping up for women. We know from our research that the vast majority of men, 97%, say we actually do want to close the gender gaps. We want to work and advocate for inclusion. But here's the answer to your question. A full 82% of men feel this incredible pressure to conform to what we call rigid masculine norms. We call it the man box in the book. We didn't invent that term, but we like that term because it's not about the men themselves. It's about the expectations that all of us, for a number of reasons, expect men to show up as competitive and driven and aggressive and stoic and lacking the full range of emotion and authenticity that we know they want. While 82% feel pressure to conform, 94% say we actually have a lot of anxiety because it doesn't represent who we are operating that way in the workplace. So we started digging underneath, though, what are the challenges that men are facing in the workplace? And when they bring those challenges, it actually not only harms men, it actually harms the advancement of women as well in creating the cultures where everybody can rise.
Yeah, I want to underscore a little bit about this because when I was doing gender, I still am doing gender work, but when I was very deeply involved in doing gender advancement or helping women advance, when I would talk to men or interview men, they would say to me, I have the exact same problems. So whatever issue I would lay out about what women are struggling with, men have the same set of struggles. Now, I think it takes a different tone and a different, they take a different path to resolving that perhaps, and there may be some style differences. I don't know for sure about that one. But I think the issues that people struggle with at work are the same across genders. So I think it's interesting. I also think this layer, though, of adding on the pressure to be a particular masculine stereotype is another layer we have to be thinking about. And I think we do that in work and outside of work as well.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. And I think we're seeing this resurgence, or maybe for the first time, this real focus on not only men at work. I think that's what Catalyst is bringing, the unique perspective to bear. But when you look at a lot of other literature and books and podcasters and authors and experts, we're really starting to focus more on boys and men outside of the workplace. And just a couple other stats. And this is when we were writing this book, these stats were really surprising to me. So when you look at things like suicide rates of men globally, it's twice as much as that of women. If you look in the United States, it's 3.5 times greater. When you look at depression rates, they are 4 times more likely to be depressed. And in the United States, a full 15% of men say, I do not have one close personal relationship. People don't know me. And so think about that then coming into the workplace. And we're trying to create environments where we can be more open and vulnerable and authentic, deeper understanding of each other. Men don't feel comfortable doing that.
Well, we're also seeing, especially in the U.S., resurgence of a classic feminism prototype as well. That's not our topic here, but I think we're sort of stereotyping both genders in a way that is not necessarily productive to the kind of work we want to see happen in the environment. Okay, I want to dig a little deeper in the data, and I'll come back to those stats in just a minute. This is controversial, though, for Catalyst, an organization that's largely been focused on the advancement of women, to be talking about men. So, give me the pitch on why you, as the head of Catalyst, would be writing this book.
So it is. So the title, Men at Work, is by design very provocative. But Catalyst this is not our beginning of work with and for men. Going back 30 years, Catalyst really invented the term sponsorship. And we started to look at the really critical role men played in advancing the acceleration of women. And when you think about sponsorship, it's the people in positions of power and influence leveraging that to help others, ideally others who do not look like them. So men sponsor men very easily and readily, just like mentorship and allyship. But it was a real focus on we as women cannot rise without the support of men because they command the vast majority of positions of power. Now, that has not changed. So just more data for us. When you look globally, fewer than 10% of women are CEOs, 23% of women are board members, and less than a third are in senior leadership positions. Now, that's global data, and it's about the same in the United States. So the question becomes, what is the role of the people in power to change the culture and to change the systems? And so that's where it became really critical to talk about sponsorship. 15 years ago, we started talking about allyship and advocacy, things we could all do at any level, but primarily it was pointed at men. what could you do to be our allies and our advocates? And Catalyst started the MARC program. It's called Mutual Accountability for Real Change, to bring men and women together at all levels, but mostly the senior leadership level, to help deepen our understanding of what does it look like to be an effective ally. Here is what has changed. However, through that programming over the last several years, we've actually realized, and I personally experienced it myself, as men talked about and kind of awakened to their need to move, from the apathy to the advocacy continuum and the role that they played, they were talking about exactly what you said, which is, I really struggle in the workplace too. And something that prevents me from standing up for women is feeling like I'm breaking the bro code, as an example, or I'm disrupting the status quo, which is going pretty well for us, by the way. It was through those types of conversations where we could get a deeper understanding of the pressure they were feeling to stay inside this man box. So that's the evolution of the research that Catalyst has done. Sponsorship and allyship are still critical, but unless we can identify how we can work together as gender partners so that we see we all can contribute and we all benefit, I'm not sure we're going to see the acceleration of change, certainly not in this environment.
I can see that. And I think it's hard to say, hey, help me, or why don't you help this population, when no one's willing to acknowledge the struggles that the people who are supposedly helping are also having. And I think that's absolutely fair. I get that they have more advantages in some ways, but they also have lots of struggles. Okay, come back to this notion you described, the man box, which you said is not your language, it's picked up from other places. How would you describe this masculine stereotype that you see emerging that men need to adhere to?
Yeah, I think so. The use of the language man box, again, and it initiated in the book. We talk about the history of how it initiated, but we really like it because it's not focusing on the term we don't use at all, which is toxic masculinity, which presumes that there's something wrong with the men themselves. Mm-hmm. We believe that there's the box is a structure that is created from childhood, and men, just like women, get messages from whether it's parents or school or now social media or cinema. How am I supposed to act? And so that is called the man box. And breaking out of that box is possible, but it's challenging. And so we believe that as men come into the workplace with this perception of the way they are supposed to be, I've got to be tough. I can never cry. I have to be aggressive and competitive and driven. I have to hide my emotions and be stoic. Those are the types of things that are creating the challenges, not only in the workplace, but in the home place as well.
And the community space and the every other place in which we have people showing up. Okay, all right. So do you have evidence, Jennifer, that this man box, the prevalence of the man box has accelerated, or has it always been there? Is it worse today, or is it the same as it's always been?
We could dissect, and this might be fun to dissect what's happened across the last couple of years. And, when we think back to, the Me Too movement, when you think back to Black Lives Matter, when you think back to COVID, which now seem very long ago, but 6 to 7, 8 years ago, the pendulum had swung the other way. And there was this very, very heightened focus on what the other, so non-white men are experiencing. And I thought, I think that was healthy from an awareness perspective. But I think underneath it all, and we should talk about this, there was a sense that men, white men specifically, were being excluded and left out or blamed or shamed, or at best being asked to help from the sidelines, be our sponsors, our mentors, our allies. And so I think we potentially did ourselves a bit of disservice by unintentionally or intentionally excluding men in those positions of power by not bringing them fully in to the not only the contribution, but also helping them see how it benefits them.
Yeah, I certainly recognize that same pendulum swing, particularly in the U.S. And probably globally if we dig into the data. I don't want to go there because then we'll be talking all day about the data and the global trends and so on. But I certainly recognize that where a number of men, not all men, feel that, why am I helping? Because nobody's helping me. And there wasn't sort of anything of understanding of what I'm struggling with
and how I feel about this, and that isn't helping me contribute to other people. And fair enough, when we talk about sponsorship, I've always understood sponsorship as a quid pro quo relationship, in that somebody is going to help me have access to rooms of power and represent me well and maybe give me opportunities. But I have an obligation that's reciprocal in that relationship, to do good work, to speak well of them, to help that person as well. And we often miss, when we're asking for help, the reciprocity that comes with offering help. I don't know if you want to respond to that or not.
It's a really, I think it's a very fair point. I think there have been a lot of very well-intentioned formal sponsorship programs that are asking a lot, and they're across all genders, but primarily asking a lot of men to jump in and support and help potentially someone that is assigned to them that they don't know really well. And so there's this sense of maybe I'm giving more than I'm getting. But I think what I'd like to do is talk about what is preventing men from stepping up for women. And this was fascinating research that we did a couple of years ago, and it makes so much sense. And there's individual reasons and there's organizational reasons, and each commands a chapter in the book. The individual reasons are simple. One, we call it ignorance. Doesn't mean men are ignorant or men are bad. It's just the simple lack of awareness. And I use the story in the book of my husband when I helped make him aware of the fact that he'd worked on sales teams in the financial services industry for 20 years. And I watched him, and never one time there was a woman as his peer on the team. And I thought that was odd. And his first reaction was, I guess you're right. I never really thought about it. Right. So that's just like, it's not in my purview or my awareness. The second reason is apathy. So when I asked him to step up for a woman who was underneath him but had amazing potential, her name is Priya, and he said, it's not really my role. I'm not her manager, and I'm not an HR. So that's apathy. It's like, I see the problem now that I've been made aware of it. Like, yeah, somebody should fix it. It's just not my problem to fix. And the third, and I think this is the biggest, going back to your previous question, is fear. And this is where the man box comes in. It could be fear of breaking a code, breaking the status quo, or it could be a fear of what is this going to do to me and my job? So, probably unfounded that, all of a sudden, male jobs would, men in roles their jobs would disappear, at their own expense with women stepping in. So that would be the fear part. So that's the individual reasons and they're good reasons, right? That men prevent men, they're barriers from standing up for women.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I get that. This complex story, and we haven't really appreciated all the complexity on it. Let's go back to your data. You gave me some data points already that 82% of men feel the pressure to conform to very rigid masculine norms, that 94% have anxiety that people don't know who they are. Okay. That's high. And you give me all this data about there's more suicide among men than women. There's more depression. There's more whole bunch of stuff by a large number. Okay, so what's the database that you're using to draw these conclusions?
So the data around the suicide and depression, what's happening in the external environment is very well documented through external sources like the American Psychological Association and the World Health Organization. So we've captured external data. The data around what we call the pressure to conform, and again, this kind of we call it the masculine anxiety that men feel, was a result of a Catalyst study with thousands of men across multiple industries in multiple countries. And so that data set was created by Catalyst, as was the data set around, what is preventing men from stepping up? The newer data, which we're excited about, demonstrates that actually men really do want to help. So this is why I really hate the term toxic masculinity, because the vast majority of men are saying, I actually want to close the gender gap at work. Show me how, very tangibly. And so what we try and do in the second half of the book is demonstrate what does a leader at any level, some are frontline, and what do organizations look like when they are operating as gender partners? And gender partners are across genders, women helping men, men helping men, women helping women, which has been well documented as well as a challenge.
So, what else do you know then about men and the experience they're having with this anxiety to conform?
All right, so let's talk about that. I talked about 94% of men reported to us that at work they've experienced at least some level of what we call masculine anxiety. And that's basically the sense of distress for not living up to the expectations that are stereotypically male. All right, so what does that actually mean? When we get underneath it, when a workplace has this, what we call these narrow expectations about what is acceptable for men, the impacts are pretty severe. So 69% of men say, I have a low psychological well-being. So it impacts me mentally. A third of them are saying it actually impacts my ability to do my job well. So you see things like neglecting tasks or being late or making excuses. That when there are what we call low masculine expectation environments, so they actually do have more of an expectation for men to show up more broadly than the narrow masculine expectations, those figures drop radically. So we know, like if 64% of men saying I've got low psychological well-being, where they don't have those expectations, there's only 38% of them say that. When they say, a third of them say I'm experiencing impact on my workplace, my ability to perform, only 5% say that when there's a broader expectation. So again, this is pretty, this gets a little bit nerdy into the data, and it's all in the book if you are a data person, but we wanted to get to what does it actually mean when men are feeling this type of pressure.
Okay. All right. So the pressure to conform to the masculine norms is real, strong, pervasive globally. 84% of men are feeling it. 94% are feeling some anxiety about it. That anxiety translates to real impact on the quality of work they're doing, the safety they feel, the well-being they feel, and ultimately the work, their ability to get work done. When we reduce that pressure to conform, then we end up with better scores on well-being and productivity and getting work done. So clearly from that data, having a less conform, rigid, standard norm in the workplace is helpful to men and therefore helpful to everybody.
Yeah, and it's, these things are complex, right? You don't wave a magic wand and say like we're reducing our level of expectation for men to conform. So this is where organizational culture becomes so incredibly important. So the piece I didn't mention when we talk about why are men not engaging in the efforts to bridge the gender gap, there's the individual piece. We talked about fear, apathy, ignorance, but there's also the organizational piece. And there's a whole chapter in the book around when organizations have combative cultures, when there's pervasive climates of silence, when there's a lot of pressure and less psychological safety and pressure to conform to the most senior person in the room, then this becomes a lot more challenging. So in the book, we talk, the whole second half is how do you actually create cultures and model leadership that reduces that combative culture, climates of silence, and enable people to get over their concerns and help men as well with the struggles that we've been talking about.
All right. Fair enough. I love that. Combative culture, culture of silence, and this pressure to conform to whatever the most senior person is like. All right. So you were precluding where I want to go, Jennifer, which is what do we do about it? Because great, I get it. Men are struggling. Okay. How do we help fix this?
This is my favorite part of the book because it comes to life through exception. We got the data, we've got the frameworks, we understand the problem, but then it comes to life through the stories and the practice. And so Catalyst created what's called the 5B framework, and that's the roadmap. So hence the subtitle of the book, The Roadmap to Gender Partnership. And this is what our most current work is. And our latest research around when leaders operate this way, when we have cultures this way, we can actually close the gender gap faster.
Great. So tell me about the 5Bs. What are they?
The first is begin with you. And this is for all of us. But what I love about this work is that it's exceptionally personal, and we need to find ways to create awareness and to create kind of an awakening. And the research that we have done also says that men come to this work more openly and readily when they themselves can recite a period or a moment in their lives at work where they felt excluded as well, where they felt potentially that they didn't belong, where they were harassed. I mean, there's stories in the book of men being harassed too. And so that creates that opening awareness. My favorite story is Mike Wirth. He's the CEO, acting CEO of Chevron. And he talks about a moment earlier in his career. He was an executive, a male executive, and he found himself in a room surrounded by women executives, and he was the only man. And he got in touch with he talks about his heart racing, his palms sweating. And what he realized was, wait a minute, like, women feel this way every single day. So that was his moment of awareness and awakening that helped him drive the concepts of gender partnership at Chevron.
And I certainly see that, having run programs with lots of women sitting in the room, and you'll have a senior male come in to speak to them. And there's that moment when they cross the threshold, and you can see that kind of flicker across their eyes if they're going, whoa, this is not my comfort zone. I don't want to get it wrong, all of that. And there's anxiety. You can just see it. Now, most of them conquer it quickly because they're skilled at conquering quickly, but it is certainly there and alive and well, and for more people than just Mark. All right, so begin with you. Get in touch with your own sense of exclusion or variations on that theme.
And build your awareness, right? Many men come to this work. It just happened yesterday when I was in Paris, where a man will talk about his awakening through the lens of his partner, his spouse, or a woman's spouse, or through the lens of his daughters. And while I will take any awakening, however it comes, I like that not to be the only one, right?
Okay.
To then actually bring that and start noticing that with his colleagues, with his direct reports. So that awakening around, well, wait a minute, am I offering different, whether it's conversations or access or experiences, to across genders? Am I operating differently? So that's how that awakening gets pointed at the workplace.
Right. I'm just going to add one to that, and then we're going to go on to the second B, which is one of my favorite things to do is to ask men, and the female managers as well, where do you spend your informal time? When it's not structured, who are you talking to at work? Track it, keep track of it, and spread it around equally is all I ask, because that gives access to you. Okay, so begin with you, the awakening and the awareness. What's step number 2? B number 2
is break down what's not working. And again, at any level of leadership, you can look at two things. One is, how, are you getting enough feedback around how you are personally as a leader? And in the book, we talk a lot about, kind of moving back to this over the last couple of years, but that command and control leadership creates those combative cultures and climates of silence and shuts people down and prevents men as well from operating with their full authenticity. So what kind of a leader are you? And consciously or unconsciously, what are you doing from a leadership perspective that is preventing any of us across genders from showing up in our strengths and authenticity? So we talk about Alan Mulally in the book, who's one of my personal mentors. He's the former CEO of Ford and Boeing. And he talks about a time in his career where he started to emulate other leaders at Boeing to more of a command and control leadership style, which was not innate to him. His style was much more open and collaborative and authentic and trusting. And his direct reports came to him and said, we are going to leave you because we know you're not operating as you really are. And so with the support of his manager and then ultimately the Boeing board, he leaned into his authenticity as a leader. And that's, we've documented that in the book. The other thing, however, is break down what's not working in terms of the systems. And this is, again, if you are in a position and if you are any type of manager, you are involved in systems like hiring, like talent calibration, like who gets the promotion? Are they being paid equally? So do not relegate that to HR. It's up to all of us to look at and become aware of the systemic structures that must change if we're going to close the gender gap.
Okay, so I've got to begin with you, which is an awareness and awakening, and, sort of tune into your own experiences and those around you. I've got the breakdown what's working, like how are you contributing to what's not working, your personality, your style, your approach, as well as the systems. Understand those systems and take action on them. All right, what's the third B?
The third B is potentially the most controversial one, but that's why I like it the best, which is build up what's in it for men. And when I was in Paris this past week, someone had the courage to say, what about what's in it for women? Why are we talking about building up what's in it for men? It's always been, there's always been a lot in it for men. But the truth is that we have, again, probably inadvertently been crafting this work-life integration concept as a women's issue. And we must stop doing that. So things I really love to see are cultures that have systems that create equality in things like health benefits, as an example. So equal parental leave, where whether it's biological or by adoption, across genders have the ability. The story in the book is around Santa Fe's, not only created a 16-week parental leave policy across genders, they created a culture that almost demanded that you take it. So it benefits men, obviously, because they have that freedom and time to spend with their newborn, but it also helps women. It's women stepping off, even to take maternity leave and coming back. If the men weren't doing the same, it puts them immediately at a disadvantage. And there's a lot of data around every child a woman has impacts her ability in terms of pay and promotion, but every child a man has, it actually increases his ability to be paid more and to get promoted faster. And so it levels the playing field and it helps everyone.
Right. And there have been some wonderful writings about the power of men being more involved as parents, having, being primary caretakers in some instances as well, and having those equal rights, and just fathers bonding with their children. I mean, there's wonderful work about that one. So build up.
I want to make sure it goes beyond.
Yes, I agree.
Because this is what, if men are listening to this podcast, here's my message to you: make your life outside of work more visible on your calendar. Talk about it. I'm taking off to take my kid to the doctor. My mother is ill. And I just need some time. I'm training for a marathon and my personal health right now is really important to me. To create, that gets back to that culture. Are we creating a culture where those things are permissible? And that helps to break the walls of the man box as well.
Okay. I like that one. So making your life outside of work, what's important to you outside of work, more visible. That helps people connect to you, and it's good for everybody. All right, so that's the third B. What's the fourth B?
The fourth B is bridge the gender gap. And this gets really specific about, okay, what can I actively do as a leader at any level? And so there's many different stories in the book that illustrate things like, what does it look like, again, across genders, for me to lift and shine a spotlight on others, to remove an obstacle? I tell a recent story from a couple months ago where Kenji Yoshino, he's the one of the founders of the NYU Meltzer Law School's Meltzer Center for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging. We invited him to our conference in Canada, and he is one of the foremost constitutional law experts on the topic of DEI in the whole world. And we brought him in as that expert. We were engaging in a CEO breakfast the next morning after the event. And he and I were on a panel together. And when I looked at the questions that a CEO was going to ask us, it was all pointed at Kenji and his expertise. And I looked at that and thought, I don't really need to be on the panel at all. I don't have a role and I'm not able to demonstrate my own expertise. And he looked at me and didn't even know I was feeling that way the night before the breakfast. And he said, what does success look like for you? It was such a simple question, but it opened up my own vulnerabilities around, I'd like to be seen as an expert alongside you. This is a Catalyst hosted event. I'd like to ensure that our research and insight shines as well, as opposed to us bringing the experts in. And he said, I've got you. The very first question, the moderator looked at him and said, Kenji, we are going to be pummeling you with questions for the next hour. And he did not miss a beat. And he said, well, I'm going to cede the floor first to Jennifer because she's really the true expert with Catalyst longstanding research. And I'm going to offer her the first word. Again, he wasn't shaming anyone. He just shifted so beautifully, and it's so simple. And that allowed me so that was an example of bridging the gender gap. There's deeper ones in the book around how do we actually create a larger table? Because this isn't about ushering out very highly qualified men. This is about making more room and space. So how do you actually do that? And so stories of leaders expanding the leadership table, both broadly across functions and business units and deeply in creating things like operating teams where you get a much greater diversity, not only of gender, but diversity of geography and experience and race and personality, and the stories in the book about the business results that come from bridging the gender gap that way.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite stories on this idea, how do you expand the table, is a leader of a business who's been on the podcast. saying, I have, there's a new woman on my leadership team, and I don't want everybody talking over her. I've seen this too many times. It's not going to happen. So sure enough, somebody jumps in on the back end of her sentence and cuts her off, as always happens inevitably. And he let the guy finish, and then he just turned back around and said to her, wait a minute, I want you to repeat what you said because it was important. Just that space to repeat, to acknowledge that there was a thing that got lost. And I think that's applicable whoever is getting cut off for whatever reason. There's many, many versions of that. That simple making space just changes the culture. Everybody figures it out pretty quickly. Okay, so bridging the gender gap. What's B number 5?
The last one is bring humanity to work. And this is again about how do we actually, break the barriers of the man box and create an environment where everybody across genders feels like they can bring more of themselves, whatever portion that they'd like to bring to work. And I actually like the story here of the MARC program. So as I mentioned before, our mutual accountability for real change, or programming we do from the C-suite down to the front line. But the purpose of it is to help bring humanity to work by creating a depth of understanding of who each of us is and what we bring. So we do an exercise right up front, and I'm only going to give you one example of it, but we help create transparency, vulnerability, and authenticity by asking leaders to very quietly answer questions through this kind of physical manifestation, walking across the line. It's called the walk the line exercise. But we explore things like you are a member of your family is a member of the LGBT plus community. You immigrated to the country, or your parents immigrated to the country you now live in. You practice a religion other than Christianity. So they're all different kind of slices of who we are. But here's the one that hit me the most, which was, and it showed my own biases as well. So the question was, you have hidden a part of yourself to fit in or protect yourself at work. So of course I'm thinking, oh, women are hiding things about, do they have children? And so I was thinking about all the non-white men would be crossing the line because we've all been hiding a part of ourselves. And what surprised me in a beautiful way was so many white men crossed the line too. And what occurred to me was, we don't. There's so little that we really know about each other in the workplace. And if we could actually create that humanity and that connection, that creates gender partnership potentially faster than anything else.
It creates greater trust. It probably creates greater psychological safety. It probably creates a whole bunch of other things. I think it's the starting point for every good manager is to understand something about each person that works with you, understand the humanity. Yeah, I'm surprised with you, Jennifer, whenever I do, all sorts of activities, even with the top team. When I'm leading a workshop with the top team, they may have worked together for years and they actually know relatively little about each other. So it doesn't take much to ask a question that they go, wow, I didn't know that about you. Okay, yeah, I knew you had children, but I didn't know that your hobby was, or that you once did, or whatever. So I think there's plenty of room to bring that humanity to work. Okay, so Jennifer, if I try to wrap this up in a nice little package, we've talked a long time about the ways in which women are struggling at work, but it's fair and appropriate that we focus on where men are struggling as well. And this is this pressure to conform to a very rigid masculine norm, so often set by the senior leader, but in other ways as well. And acknowledge that that's creating a lot of anxiety and that is impacting work as well. And that makes it harder for men to be the kind of support and allies and create the partnerships that we would like to see across genders or across any differences. 5 B's. Begin with you. So awareness and awakening start with your own experiences of feeling rejected and tune into what's around you. 2, break down what's not working, both in your own leadership style as well as in the systems that are not working for everyone. 3, build up what's in it for men. Get men to talk more about their life outside of work and what they're doing to manage that life outside of work. 4, bridge the gender gap, making it a larger table so that there's more room for different voices at the table, and sanction that, welcome it, embrace it. And the last one is bring your humanity to work, which is your full self, getting to know different things about different people and bringing your own so that people can get to know you. How do we do?
You did such a beautiful job. And I think just to wrap a bow on it, myself as well, or to tie a bow on this, is I think one of the things that surprised us the most was that, and still surprises me, when I speak on this for the first time. I've been speaking to rooms full of women for so many years. For the first time, men are in the room alongside women when I speak about this topic. But what continues to surprise and endear me is men will come up to me. Women always have come up to me. Thank you. This is so important. We need to be surfacing this. Men are now saying the same thing. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for inviting me in. Thank you for helping me see what I can do differently and how I benefit too. And I think the summary of this entire thing is that, workplaces were never designed for women, but they're not necessarily working for men either. And through this concept and movement of gender partnership, we believe that it potentially is one of the most critical levers that we can pull to accelerate the progress for women, and seeing in men that they benefit too. So we still have to work on the systems. We still have to work on the business case. But I think this is a very under-leveraged opportunity that we have together.
Yeah, what strikes me about this one is we get a better organization for everybody. We get a better culture. We probably get better collaboration. We probably get better innovation. We probably get better productivity if we create a culture where we allow different styles and practices and personalities and preferences to be themselves. And what I really like about the work that you're advocating is it's creating an equal playing field for many people to come together and say, right, I'm not like that either, and that's okay, rather than trying to conform. So,
that's right.
Jennifer,
our work in inclusion, nobody can be excluded, including men, and specifically white men.
Okay, fair enough. Jennifer McCollum is my guest today. The book we've been talking about is Men at Work, The Roadmap to Gender Partnership. Jennifer, if somebody wanted to find you, where's the best place to reach you?
Catalyst.org. You can find all kinds of information about gender partnership writ large, and also a lot more information about the book. You can buy this book anywhere that you get your books, and I would absolutely encourage all of you to follow me on LinkedIn as well as Catalyst.
Wonderful. I think it. Thank you. Jennifer McCollum. Again, the book is The Men at Work. What a great conversation. Thanks for joining us. It's been fabulous. Join us next week for another episode in Getting Out of Your Comfort Zone. We love to hear from you. Send us a note in any kind. We want to hear your comments, your questions, all of that, and we'll get back to you. So until next week, have fun out of your comfort zone.
Thank you for joining us today. Tune in for another edition next week with Dr. Wanda Wallace on the Voice America Business Channel. Reach outside your comfort zone this week.